If you've ever thought about trying an operating system that isn't Windows or Mac OS, you've definitely heard the word Linux. But then right away, you hear about Ubuntu and Fedora, Mint, Arch, and suddenly it all gets really confusing. Are those all Linux? What's the real difference? Well, let's break it down and get this all cleared up. This is the big question, right? It feels like there are hundreds of different versions out there, and honestly, it can be a little overwhelming. But trust me, by the time we're done here, you're going to understand exactly how they're all connected and, more importantly, what makes them different. Okay, so to make sense of all those different names, we have to start at the very beginning. We have to ask the fundamental question: what, technically, is Linux? And here it is, probably the single most important thing to get your head around. When tech folks talk about Linux, they aren't actually talking about a full-blown operating system. Nope, they're talking about the kernel. Think of the kernel as the absolute core of the system. It's the master translator that lets your software talk to your physical computer hardware, the CPU, the memory, all that stuff. It manages everything behind the scenes. The best way to think about this is with a car analogy. The Linux kernel is like the engine. It's incredibly powerful, it's absolutely essential. But an engine by itself isn't a car. You can't hop on it and drive to the store. It's just a piece of the puzzle. It needs a body, wheels, steering wheels, seats, all the other parts to actually become a useful vehicle. The kernel is that engine. Powerful, but not the whole machine. So, if the kernel is just the engine, where does the rest of the car come from? Well, that brings us to our next big idea: the distro. A Linux distribution, or distro for short, is the whole package. It's the complete, ready-to-use operating system. A distro takes the Linux kernel, our engine, and then bundles it with all the other necessary parts. Essential system programs, something called a package manager, which is kind of like an app store, a graphical desktop environment so you have icons and windows, and of course, all the applications you'd expect, like a web browser. So let's tie that all together with our analogy. A distro, like Ubuntu or Fedora, that's the entire car. It's the finished product that you can actually get in and drive. This is the key takeaway, really. You don't just run Linux on your computer. You run a Linux distribution. So how does someone actually build one of these things? Well, it's a lot like building a custom car. First, you pick your engine, the version of the Linux kernel you want to use. Then you add the essential utilities. After that, you make a really big decision: which package manager you're going to use. This basically defines how users will install and update software. Then you start bundling in apps, you pick a desktop environment for the overall look and feel, and finally, you test and secure the whole thing before you release it to the world. Okay, so that explains how a distro is made. But it doesn't really get to the why. Why are there literally hundreds of different options? Why not just one or two, like with Windows or Mac OS? The answer gets to the very heart of what makes Linux, well, Linux. And this is it. This is the magic ingredient. The Linux kernel is open source. What that means is that its source code is completely free and available for anyone on the planet to see, to modify, and to build upon. This incredible freedom is exactly why the Linux world is so diverse. Anybody with the know-how can take that kernel engine, pair it with their own selection of parts, and create a brand new car designed for whatever they want. Now, to avoid getting lost in the hundreds of options, it really helps to think of them in terms of families. Most distros you'll hear about belong to one of a few major parent projects. You've got the Debian family, which is famous for being rock solid and is the foundation for super user-friendly distros like Ubuntu. Then there's the Red Hat family, which is a total powerhouse in the corporate and server world. The Arch family is for the tinkerers, the people who love minimalism and building their system up from scratch, and SUSE is another big player, especially in the enterprise space. To really see this in action, let's look at a perfect example. We're going to compare two of the most famous names out there: Debian, the big parent project, and Ubuntu, its most well-known child. Now, here's what's so interesting. Even though Ubuntu is built directly on top of Debian, they have completely different goals. Debian's whole philosophy is stability, stability, stability. Their releases are slow, sometimes years apart, because they test everything exhaustively. This makes it perfect for servers that absolutely cannot go down. But Ubuntu takes that stable foundation and makes different choices. It's backed by a company, Canonical, and it releases new versions like clockwork every 6 months. It tries to strike a balance between being stable and having the latest, newest software, which is exactly why it's so popular with beginners and desktop users.
All right, we have covered a ton of ground. We've gone from the kernel all the way to the huge ecosystem of distros. So let's just pause for a second and boil it all down to the most important points you need to remember.
If you only remember one thing from all of this, please let it be this right here. Linux is the kernel. That's the engine. A Linux distribution, like Ubuntu or Mint, is the full operating system. That's the entire car. Getting that one distinction right is the key that unlocks everything else about this world.
So you might be thinking, okay, I get it, but with all this choice, where on earth do I start? Well, for anyone just starting out, the community consensus is pretty clear. The two most recommended places to begin are either Ubuntu or Linux Mint. And the reason is simple. They are both designed to be as easy as possible to install and use right out of the box. They have fantastic documentation and huge communities online, so if you ever run into a problem, help is easy to find. They're just the smoothest on-ramp into the world of Linux.
And that's really what the Linux world is all about: freedom and choice. It's about having the power to pick an operating system that works exactly the way you want it to. Whether you're running a massive server or just your everyday laptop, whether you're a total beginner or a seasoned expert, there is a distro out there that's perfect for you. So, the only real question left is, which one are you going to try first?